Okay, so let's call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's June 16th, 2021 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting, the Great Barrington Selectboard and Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public or parties with a right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to Mass General Law 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB, by the town. I'm going to go on a limb and say Michelle will be recording this, and the Berkshire Edge and Berkshire Eagle, as well as other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. So this meeting is starting at 7 instead of our usual 6. And we will have a time limit to go to 8:30 because it's kind of late and members express a desire for that, and I agree with them. So there is no pressure to finish all 15 items. We'll get as far as we can, and we'll pick up where we left off tomorrow night if we don't finish. So there's no pressure to finish those items. And thank you for both boards for indulging me in starting a little later. I appreciate that. So let's start with a roll call of each board. I'll start with the Select Board. Garfield?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Ed?
Here.
Lee?
Here.
And I'm here, so it's all Select Board members are here. Phil?
I think Phil has dropped off again, so I'll call the roll call. Phil's coming back in.
Okay.
So I'll start. Michelle?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Meredith?
Here.
Phil?
Whoops.
You're muted? Can you unmute? Phil?
I think he's trying to unmute. Well, we see him, so.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, great. Phil's here. And I'm here as well, so we're all here.
Okay, great. So I will turn this over now for the budget overview for the town manager presentation to the town manager.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. Just bear with me. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to just start out by saying that I'm really pleased to be presenting this budget tonight. This is my third budget presentation as your town manager. So I'd like to just start with a budget summary or overview, and then we can dive right into the departments in just a minute. Okay, so starting off our budget priorities for this fiscal year, fiscal 23. This is, just an overview again, but some of the things we were keeping in mind as we developed this budget. Public safety and public health, of course, year 3 of COVID, maintaining a high quality of life by providing exceptional public services to our residents and visitors, always something in the back of our minds when we develop these budgets. Investing in our public infrastructure, being a model employer, and we'll talk a little more about that later. Looking to our future and investing in our stabilization accounts, and then of course being mindful of Great Barrington's master plan. This next slide is our revenue sources, and this is just a snapshot of our revenues for fiscal 23, and we'll talk more about this as well as we go through the budget process. But in summary, we expect an increase of 4.7% this year. And I should just say before I get too far along here that I do intend to post this presentation on our website after tonight. So we'll make this publicly available for anyone that would like a copy. So moving on to expenditures, again, just a summary, and we'll review the individual budget requests shortly. And then slide number 5 is our spending plan in a pie chart. So you'll see town ops in blue, which is 37% of our proposed budget. The enterprise fund in orange, which is about 7% of our budget. And then special articles, capital, and state assessments at 2%, 1%, and 1%. And then the Berkshire Hills Regional School District assessment at 52%. Moving on, our town operating budget. This is a 5-year look at town operations, some historical data. And slide number 7. This slide breaks down our proposed spending plan by category. And here's a 5-year look at our capital program. And you'll notice that this year's proposed a little higher than most years at a little over $5.5 million, but still in line with prior years. And we'll go into more detail on this, of course, at our next meeting when we cover capital. And then some capital highlights that I just thought I should touch on. Streets and sidewalks, we're planning to continue improvements townwide, and this also accounts for engineering funds for future projects. Vehicles and equipment, this is a 2 cruiser year for us for the police department. And then you'll also see, as we cover capital later on in this process, some police body cameras and some station surveillance cameras, and the chief will talk more to that. And then buildings and grounds, we have campus improvements this year for both town hall and the Ramsdale Library entrance, some park equipment and ballpark improvements, the senior center parking lot work, and then design funds for our Castle Street pedestrian tunnel. And then finally, our special articles this year, and these look very familiar, similar to last year. Community impact funding at another $350,000 this year. Berkshire Hills Regional School District vocational tuition and transportation, another $70,000. This is, I believe, is this year 2 or year 3?
I think it's year 3.
Year 3, okay.
I'm not positive, but I think it's 3.
Okay, and then investments in stabilization and capital stabilization at $100,000 each, and I'm really happy that we're continuing that trend every year now. So I just wanted to conclude with that and say thank you to all of the department heads that contributed along this process. Chris Rembold for taking quite a bit of the heavy lifting on capital, and then Sue for the comprehensive budget. And I just wanted to say I'm looking forward to working with the Selectboard and Finance Committee as we spend the next 4 meetings together working through this. So I will leave it at that, and we can move right into departmental budgets. Thank you.
So the way this works is for people who don't remember or are new. On the agenda, if you have an agenda, it lists the topic we're going to discuss. So next will be Select Board and Town Manager. If you have a budget book, that's tab 6, and this would be the first page, page 1. It's actually not the first page, but it's page 1
of tab 6.
Of tab 6.
Yeah.
We will have, depending on the department, either a brief overview or more in-depth overview, depending on the size of the budget and the changes in the department. And then we can ask questions, have comments, and then move ahead. Tonight, most of the accounts, by my estimations, usually on the first night are the lighter lifts, but we'll see what happens. So we'll start with select board and town manager. Mark, do you want to give us a brief overview? Is it yours?
Sure, I can handle this. And would you like me, I guess it would be good for me to know, and for the department heads as well, would you like me to go line by line? And you can stop me, or?
Previously, we've done the highlights.
Okay.
Line by line may be a little tedious, but if board members think otherwise, just tell me. But you're welcome to ask questions on any line if Mark, in this case, doesn't cover them. No, I'm trying to find Ann. She keeps moving. Ann, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think also just noting or highlighting the lines where there's any significant change, more than say 4 or 5%.
Yes, absolutely.
In that boat, 3 to 4%.
Okay. So starting off with the salary section, there's really nothing significant here. You'll see 2% raises in salaries, no changes requested for the committee clerks, the intern, or longevity. Does anyone have any questions there before I move on?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions, so let's just figure out. Michelle, go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. Is there any way to share the screen so viewers can see this?
I could share. I'm happy to do the sharing. I can share it if you give me permission. I did download it, so give me 1 second.
Yeah, that would make it easier on the department heads and Mark and Chris. And if you want to run the show, that'd be wonderful. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
And actually, I had a question about this particular budget. So give me just 1 second. I'm going to share this screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm just getting everything oriented for sharing.
So while Ann's doing that, we have a total of 33 people. Before I forget, the vast majority, not all, are either department heads, select board, or finance committee, but there are some members of the public on here as well.
Good.
That's great. Thanks, Ian.
Ann, go ahead and ask your question too when you're ready.
I guess my question was about the committee clerk's budget line. Oh, I'm just trying to get this so we can all see it. It's 51114 here. And I think, I know we had a lot of issue with the minutes being transcribed and the meetings typed up this past year. And I thought that was related to the budget. There wasn't funds in the clerk's budget line. So should that be a line that we should be adding more to?
So I think just to clarify, the issue related to our minutes being behind was more about not having committee clerks. We didn't have a recording clerk for a period of time. We lost a few of them this year. We now have at least 2 folks doing this work, and we're playing catch up. So the thought going forward is that we'll have multiple people in this position, and as long as we stay within this budget, we're probably better situated in case someone does step down in the future. I think we're okay financially here, unless we're considering providing this service to more boards and committees. Then we need to revisit it.
And I think we're going to provide it to the finance committee. Is that correct, Mark?
Right, and we can cover that in our current budget.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think if we're going to provide it to more committees and boards, I think that's a discussion that needs to be had separate from the budget. I don't know if we're there yet, but it's good to hear that we have enough money in there to cover what we need right now.
Okay,
so even though there's not an explicit reference to a clerk under finance committee, you still believe we're covered for finance committee?
It comes out of the select board town manager's line item.
All right.
We've been covering those meetings in this fiscal year as well.
Right.
So
I feel comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate
Any other questions on select board town manager?
Mark, can you just elaborate in a little more detail what the advertising budget is for and how it's typically used?
Sure. Advertising is typically used for job postings whenever we advertise public hearings, whether it's for the select board, planning board, any public hearings for boards and committees. We'll use a portion of this funding to advertise the RFP and market the RFP for the Housatonic School this year. And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
And Mark, if I could ask just one more question, and it's a bit of due diligence here, because I think I know the answer, but legal has gone up about 10%. And so we've only spent about 23,000 so far this year, but are we anticipating more legal expenses next year?
Yes, I was looking to increase this again this year based on year-end actuals last year.
Yeah.
I've been consistently looking to increase the legal line since I started here a few years ago, because I think it was traditionally and historically underfunded. So I'm trying to get it to a more realistic number. We're always hovering around that $100,000 range.
Okay.
I think that we're finally now getting closer to a more realistic legal budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Michelle, go right ahead.
I'm looking at contracted services, Mark. FY22, the town meeting vote was 48. I'm looking at the actuals, and I see 28,000 being budgeted this year. Can you just shine some light on that? Going from 48 down to 28.
Sure. I'm going to have to lean on Sue here for the year-end actual number. But as far as the drop from 48 to 28, last year, if you recall, I asked for an additional $20,000 in that account to cover what at that time was supposed to be an HR consultant. And that has since shifted to an HR employee, which we're going to cover in a budget tonight as well. So the $28,000 for this year would be to cover our PR contract, which is generally in the $20,000 to $22,000 range. And then that leaves us a little cushion of $68,000 for any other consultants that we use throughout the year.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So let's move on to Finance Committee Reserve Fund. That would be page 2.
All right, Mark, if I recall correctly, the contingency was primarily there for salary adjustments. Is that correct?
That's right. Last year, we asked for $60,000 for salary adjustments, and the conversation at that time was about the salary survey that we were in the process of doing. This year, I'm asking for the boards to consider $17,500. That was originally $20,000. We near the end of this budget process, when we were trying to trim the budget a bit, we took a little money out of there, but this would be for mid-fiscal year salary increases during recruiting or for retention of current employees as needed.
Okay, and if you could maybe just give me some more detail on this particular reserve fund, sort of what is, there are a handful of reserve funds in our finances. What is the objective of this particular reserve fund, and how does it stand relative to the others?
This particular reserve fund is a catch-all. So you will not expend any money out of this account unless a department comes forward with a specific request. So if, for example, and I'll just use the police department here, if the police department comes up $20,000 short for some reason, they would come to the finance committee and request that approval and explain the need at that time. So nothing in this account would ever be expended without your approval during that.
Okay. And is it fair to say that this would be the first reserve fund that would be approached, if you will, if we have an unforeseen expense, as opposed to some of the other longer term expense funds?
Correct. My understanding is that statute requires anything expended from this account to be an unforeseen expense. So we can't use it as a catch-all for budgets that we underfund intentionally, but if something comes up during the year that was unforeseen, this is how we would fund it.
Okay, but relative to the stabilization reserve that we're hoping to fund with an additional $100,000 this year, is it fair to say that this reserve fund is hit with that unforeseen expense first before going to that stabilization fund?
Stabilization fund would require a 2/3 vote out at town meeting. This is for operational expenses that come up just in fiscal year 23.
Okay, understood. That makes sense. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. Moving on to town accountant, which is page 3.
Pretty straightforward.
So I can give you the brief highlights.
Sue's having, just so everyone knows before you complain, Sue bought a new microphone, and we have to give her a bigger budget this year to get a better microphone.
Yeah.
But we're going to deal with it tonight the best we can, and hopefully everyone can hear her. If not, she may have to come back tomorrow night with screaming or something, but we're going to try.
I can switch to the iPad after my budget if that's easier. Yeah, this is brand new and it obviously isn't doing very well. So good thing my budget doesn't have any too much for increases. It's just below 4%. The salaries are just the cost of living increase of 2%. The longevity line item is new this year. I'm hitting my 5-year anniversary next January. And down in the expenditures, the only increase is in the audit line item, and we're entering into a new contract, a 3-year contract with him. So right now, that's just an estimate. I'm still waiting for the actual numbers from him. I'm hoping it won't come in any higher.
I'm sorry, can you repeat who the new contract is with?
We haven't put it out yet, but
It hasn't been bid out yet. We're due for a new contract, though.
Okay, so I'm sorry, is it for a new auditor? Is that what I heard?
or extending the contract that we have.
Okay, so the agreement we have with Scanlon is basically expired, and we can either renew with them or elect to hire someone else.
Correct.
Okay.
Michelle, go right ahead.
Hi, Sue. Could you just refresh my memory what falls under contractual in your area?
Initially, that was budgeted to bring in the former Department of Revenue, well, he's retired Department of Revenue, just to assist at, Schedule A time. It was kind of a combination between my budget and the Treasurer Collector's budget. And he would come in and assist with the accounts receivable reconciliation. I actually didn't use him this year, so it's, it's more of a reserve at the moment, but that's what it's for.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one, we will move on to technology, which is page 4.
Can you go ahead and promote Amy?
Yeah, please.
Okay, Amy, you should be good to go.
Hello.
Amy.
Amy.
So this is our proposed technology budget for FY23. No real organizational changes. Pardon me just a second.
Nope.
So we have repairs and maintenance are, the access points in the hallway and town hall for internet, those sorts of bigger projects. I believe Charlie is working on something. I'm going to work with him for a new antenna on the fire station in Housatonic, things like that, to increase the quality of their communications over there. We have contracted services, which is for the third-party IT person that we contract with, John Shannon. John's business does many towns in Berkshire County and the Pioneer Valley. Moving on, we have software, or SaaS, really. It's all online. Annual subscriptions, Data services is mobile internet. So data for phones, data for iPads, data for the police cruisers, and such. And then telephone is pretty self-explanatory. Those are cable lines as well as our new phone system, VoIP, as well as the cell phones. Does anybody have any questions?
The only thing I'll point out, Amy, is at the bottom where it says increase and decrease, there should be a minus sign in front of the 16.6. Just so I believe. No, it's an increase. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. Questions?
Yeah, Steve, it's Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
Hey, hi, Amy. Just how big is John Shannon just the sole proprietor, or does he have staff? I'm just concerned, God forbid he should get hurt.
No, he has staff.
Okay.
We see, he takes care of us personally, but he does have staff that we just don't see it. They're more in the Pioneer Valley.
But there's backup available.
He's got his staff 4 or 5.
Okay.
Yeah. He also runs the networking systems at the Big E.
Mhm.
So he's got some pretty big clients.
Okay.
Michelle, go right ahead. I'm sorry, Phil. I'll get you after Michelle.
Go ahead, Michelle. Yeah.
This is a substantial increase. I'm looking at, can you explain a little bit about why it's such a big increase to your budget? For example, software licenses going up from, let's see, town meeting vote was 140,000. We were requesting 157,000, and I see now the recommendation's 150. I just would like a little background on what is driving these increases.
Sure. So these annual subscriptions, the average rate increase per year is up to 5%. The other fluctuation you're seeing increase is there's 3 separate brand new programs that we've added to the list. So that's also adding for the increase.
Yes.
I think I was going to ask that question, but thanks for the answer. I certainly think that's an appropriate expense. I would expect to see an increase in technology expenditures for all the obvious reasons. A comment I would make is a general comment, and in general, I would definitely like to see us and support the town increasing its expenditures on technology and trying to manage or decrease its expenditures on sort of what I'll call old technology, which is office supplies and postage. I'm embarrassed to admit that I went through the book during the snowstorm over the weekend and added up all of the allocations for office supplies and copy paper and postage in our budget. And it gets to a fairly meaningful number of about $65,000. So I'm in no position to criticize or backseat quarterback any of the individual expenditures on office supplies, but as a general theme, I would just advocate that the town staff tries to focus their attention on spending more money on technology to make ourselves a little more efficient, but just thinking about trying to manage, some of the, older technology expenses relating to office supplies and paper and the like. So I'll leave it there. And yes, I'm embarrassed that I took the time to add them up, but it is a pretty meaningful number. It's surprising. And that's even without the fire district. If you add the fire district, then you get up to about 80,000.
It's just so you don't confuse people. The fire district has nothing to do with the town of Great Barrington. It is
Absolutely
separate organization. So,
Understood.
Yeah, no, I'm just afraid people listening at home may not.
No, I agree. Although it does show up on our real estate bills, so it sort of kind of hits the pocketbook there. But I appreciate your correction on that point.
Right, it's contracted services that we do the billing for. Ian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I am, and if I had to step away just for a second, but I noticed it's really a lot of it's the telephone budget is the biggest increase. And I thought we had, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we had done something to go to a new telephone system, or am I misremembering this from this past year?
We did. However, we moved half of the lines to a VoIP-based system. So, which left the other half of the lines are all of our alarm lines. And the Verizon state contracts recently changed, and we are not saving any money. If anything, they've gone up. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So that's what that is there for, basically. We're looking into a few different alarm companies to see. There are a few out there that offer VoIP options, but it is a lot to coordinate, and it's something I have to work with DPW. We can try and find a good solution for everybody.
Okay.
Anyone else? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the assessor's office, which is page 5 under tab 6.
Just promote Ross, bear with me.
Thank you.
Ross, you should be good to go.
Everyone,
How you doing,
Hello.
Ross?
can you see me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So primarily we're looking at my budget being my first time here. Looks like we're looking at roughly just a little over a 6% increase, and most of that is related to contract services. Pretty much everything else we tried to keep level, and obviously we're working towards the town manager's recommendations as we move forward in 23.
Yeah.
Do you want to just explain why contracted services went up?
Yeah, that's primarily due to, when we had to install the new CAMA software, which is the assessing software we use, we're kind of mandated to do a full field review, and we had to, contract out for some help in doing that. And we really didn't even begin that process till probably, I came on board in April. We probably didn't start like May or June. So we haven't even, made it through a full year yet. And we just need to complete that process to satisfy the DOR requirements.
Thank you. Other questions?
Is that a software system that you're adding on there, or is it a consultant?
Well, we installed new software, and when you install new software, they don't allow us just to do a desktop review, as they say. We do a full field review. So that requires people going out in the field and making sure that all the data came over correctly, which so far it has. But there might be a sketch that didn't come in or a photo that didn't come in. So we need to work to just make sure we get it all in there properly.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You too.
Take care.
Page 6, collector treasurer.
Go ahead and promote Alicia. You're good to go, Alicia.
Sorry, guys.
Hey there.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. All right. Like Ross, it's my first year here. There's not many changes to the budget from last fiscal year, other than the assistant treasurer position. There was some budgeted for sort of a clerk position last year. After some discussion, we have added an assistant treasurer, and that position is filled now. So that budget has increased. That line item has increased a little bit. Other than that, I think the only increase I had was postage, which I only increased about $1,000 because we looked pretty good this year, I think. Other than that, I either decreased or level funded. So,
All right.
Questions? I see no questions. So Alicia, pretty good for your first year, no questions.
Yeah, good job.
yeah, thank you.
Page 7 is human resources.
Okay, and I can take this. I mentioned earlier that we were moving this out of the town manager and select board budget and into its own budget, and I just wanted to briefly explain why. This position last year when we were discussing it, it was still unclear at that time whether we would be hiring a consultant or an employee. And been working with our neighboring communities, Monterey, Sheffield, West Stockbridge, and New Marlborough to fill this position as a shared approach through an intermunicipal agreement with all 5 towns. And we did receive grant funding after town meeting last year to fund $75,000 of this position. But the reality is we've advertised it 3 times. We've interviewed 3 times, 3 rounds of candidates, and we've made 3 job offers and have still not been able to land a human resource director for various reasons. One of our candidates couldn't find childcare in the area. One of them decided to turn the position down because of the salary. But the good news is this year, all 5 towns have committed to continuing our search for an HR director. And I feel comfortable after hearing the news yesterday that the grant for this fiscal 22 award of $75,000 has actually been extended into June 30th of 2023. So I think what we can probably do is trim $10,000 off of this number tonight. I would feel comfortable doing that, and the balance of roughly $18,000 in that salary line would be more than sufficient.
Ann, go right ahead.
Yeah, Mark, I'm sorry. Can I clarify? You said to trim 5,000 off of 28.5, so that's 23.5.
10,000.
Oh, to trim 10,000 off.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And when you said that we got turned down, or the person it didn't work for us, you mean the 5-town collective, right? It wasn't that they said they weren't going to come to Great Barrington. It's just they didn't want the joint or the shared position. Is that right?
Correct. All 5 town managers and administrators interviewed candidates.
Mm-hmm.
We chose the candidates to present job offers to. The 5 of us together negotiated the salaries. So we were all in line throughout the entire process, but it's a difficult position to fill. There aren't a lot of communities with municipal HR departments. So this is new for all of us in a way for us to kind of test the waters and just see how this would work.
And can you remind me what towns?
I'm sorry?
What towns? Just remind me.
Great Barrington would be the lead town, and then Monterey, New Marlborough, and Sheffield, and West Stockbridge. Right. I think the divide is 43% Great Barrington, 17% for the towns of Monterey, New Marlborough, and Sheffield, and then 2% for. So I can't remember what the fine 2%, 6%, whatever the gap is West Stockbridge.
So the funding request here is it basically 43% of the overage over the $75,000 grant?
Correct. We do anticipate using some of that $75,000 grant in this current fiscal year. We hope to hire somebody this year. That's why. Right. That's why it's not a clean number. I'm sorry, because there's just so many unknowns
Okay.
at this point.
Sure.
When they'll start, what salary they'll start at, and such.
But that's the concept, is that you have the grant, and then if we have to pay more to actually hire a person, then we pick up that portion of the cost.
Right. And I think the 18.5 that remains or would remain in that human resource manager salary line is more than enough to cover that.
Now, that agreement on allocating that person's time, is that subject to revision after some initial work period, or some period where that person actually does the job and we learn how they allocate their time?
We would revisit that annually.
Yeah. Okay. So that could go higher. It could go lower.
Correct.
All right. Okay.
So Michelle and then Tom. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi, Mark. I'm curious, number one, how will benefits be handled for the position, assuming it's benefit eligible? And I would assume so. Secondly, are you looking for an HR professional, such as a person with the designation of a SPHR or PHR? Their HR professionals come with certifications, and those are two of the highest. And then thirdly, where are you advertising? Have you advertised on the job postings on Mass Municipal Association? And where else have you advertised? I'm just a little surprised that you didn't receive more of a response. So I'm wondering if casting a wider net would be helpful.
Sure. So let me address your last question, advertising first. We typically advertise on Indeed and usually secure quite a few applicants from that platform. Not always qualified applicants, but at least a few. We do use MMA. We post on the Massachusetts Municipal Association website, and then we use our website and social media platforms.
Okay.
Mark, just to clarify, Michelle, not to interrupt, you had some candidates. Did you have plenty of candidates? They just weren't qualified, besides the ones who turned it down?
We had quite a few candidates. I'm trying to remember now that we did this 3 times. We had quite a few candidates. Round 1 was a complete bust. We weren't able to find any candidates that we felt were qualified. We were looking for someone with either a municipal background or an HR background. The ideal candidate would have both. And we only found 1 candidate in 3 searches that had both of those. So they were, of course, one of the individuals we offered the job to, but she turned it down for another position in another community.
Go ahead, Michelle. Continue.
The thing is, first off, finding somebody with HR municipal background, that's going to be difficult. HR positions in that field are fairly new. Generally, it was absorbed by the town manager, and Mark, you know this better than anybody. So that's going to be difficult. I think the best you could, probably get is an HR person from another industry coming in. But I myself, I work for a public school district in the public sector. When I look at jobs, I'm looking at Mass Municipal Association and I'm looking at School Spring. Those are the 2 drivers. So again, I'm a little surprised because on Mass Municipal Association, I see jobs from, I've seen maintenance workers jobs on Mass Municipal all the way up to high level positions in public administration. So Indeed's okay, but I think if you're looking for a position in public administration, you're looking at Mass Municipal Association.
Yeah.
I also don't know what, and maybe Tom Blauvelt knows what type of job feed there is in the HR field. Where, like I said, if you're in education, you're looking at School Spring. That's what I'm talking about. So, like I said, I'm a little surprised. Like you said, the first round was a bust. I don't know when that was done. Obviously, COVID is impacting a lot as well. It's just really interesting. And you probably didn't have time because I've been talking, addressing the benefits aspect of it.
Oh, right. I can cover that quickly. I will say, before I cover the benefits portion of your question, we did advertise this all 3 times on the Mass Municipal Association website. That is our first go-to. And then we typically will advertise with, I didn't mention this earlier, we also advertise with MMHR, which is the HR arm of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. If we were looking for a treasurer collector, for example, in addition to the MMA general website posting, we would also ask the local county association to share that, which we did. So we do look for ways to hit the municipal audience. And going back to your other question, Michelle, about benefits, I'm sorry, I skipped over that earlier. In this particular case, Great Barrington, under our intermunicipal agreement, and it has not been signed yet, it's still in draft format, but the intermunicipal agreement that we have in place now would have Great Barrington as the lead town. So the person would be a Great Barrington employee. They would be benefited from the town of Great Barrington, but the benefits would be divided up proportionally, as I explained earlier, to each of the communities.
Is that all, Michelle, or do you have more?
No, just to follow up to what Mark just said. So that do we assume responsibility for post-employment benefits then?
Yes, we would.
All right, because that's a significant cost to the town of Great Barrington. I'm not, just for the record, I'm not comfortable with that arrangement. I'll let you go to Tom, who's been very patient.
No, don't rush. We have at least till 8:30. Then we have all day tomorrow night. So, but thank you, Michelle. So, Mark, just help me understand or refresh my memory. Why do we need this position? And what prompts my question is, we have a law firm that I believe does all the labor and contract negotiations. We have in the town charter, as one of your main responsibilities, you're in charge of all the personnel. So I'm a little uncomfortable about the necessity of this. If we keep outsourcing these functions, I'm concerned that there'll be a gap between you and the staff, and that distance, you won't get to know them. I know you have 79, 80 employees, but it's just a concern I have. I'm not totally comfortable yet with this request.
So I guess what I would say, Tom, in response to that is that I think this is new. Michelle mentioned earlier that this is quite new for municipalities, but I would say that the work right now is being divided up over multiple departments. So onboarding is being handled and benefits are being handled by the treasurer collector's office. My office here is responsible for appointment letters and for dealing with contract negotiations, collective bargaining negotiations, any personnel matters that come up. Amy, for example, is covering drug testing. She's covering insurance benefits. So it's just being piecemealed up, which is very common. That we're not unique in that way for towns to do that. But when I think about a private sector company of our size with a $37 million budget and 80 full-time employees, I can't imagine a scenario where a private sector company would not have an HR person of this size.
Steve, could I say something?
Yeah, of course.
I just I want to point out, the select board members individually meet with Mark every week on what's going on, and we spend an awful lot of time talking about personnel. And Mark is the second town manager in my tenure here who's asked about this. It's not a new request. It's a new decision on our part, I guess.
Thank you, Ed. Michelle, go ahead.
I actually support the position. Like I said, I just have an issue with the benefits. Like Mark's was talking, because I have been in HR, and Mark was talking about the piecemeal approach that the public sector does, and it doesn't work. I've experienced it. I've been at both sides of it. And what you want is consistency, continuity in policies, procedures. And this isn't critical of Mark's management of the town of Great Barrington, but if you have one department doing one thing and that staff is not trained in HR policy, then you have another department doing something else. It eventually is going to blow back at Mark that somebody said the wrong thing or somebody didn't do the right piece of paper, etc. HR is a very litigious area as well. So it's a lot. And so personally, I mean, the town of Lenox and Lee, they share a person who does benefits essentially. So this is something I think we're going to see more of in the public sector. So just for the record, my issue is how the benefits are working there. We'll discuss that further later on, but thanks Mark for your time and explaining everything on this.
Mark, one last point, is there any particular reason why the potential, because I presume there's a vesting period for those post-employment benefits, but is there any reason why the sharing agreement amongst the towns did not include those benefits?
No, we did divide up the benefits equally, but we did not discuss it. It's something I brought up when we originally decided who would be the lead town. It really just made sense, honestly, for Great Barrington to be the lead community since we're 43% of the contract. And I understand. I do think that eventually, this is a good way to test the waters a bit and see how much need we have for HR. But I could see this position becoming more than just a shared service in the future. So I think eventually we're going to end up absorbing that OPEB liability anyway, I guess is where I'm going with this.
Okay, so your view based on your experience on this point and seeing all the workflow is that over time there'll be a sufficient amount of work for the town to have this employee on our full payroll and not having a sharing arrangement.
I know that's the direction we're headed in eventually, yeah.
You're speculating, I understand. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's anytime soon, but I think eventually personnel law, and it's all very complex onboarding. We don't do a great job with onboarding right now, and I take the blame for that. I mean, there's employees that I don't meet until they've been working here for several weeks or months, and I would love to have a better onboarding program in place to welcome new employees and make sure that they're trained adequately and have all the resources they need. But our staffing is thin.
Michelle, go ahead.
First off, Mark, you don't have to apologize for that because it is a lot of work. But looking at the town of Great Barrington, I pause when it comes to having a full-time HR person in the job. There are municipalities and businesses that have far more employees than the town of Great Barrington and don't have an HR person. Like I said, I'm on board with the shared HR person. I would like that OPEB looked at because that's come up over and over again. And when I hear hiring an employee, I go right to that each and every time. So personally, myself, I'm getting, just because we're the bigger target, that, we'll take it on, there's just so much the taxpayers in the town of Great Barrington can absorb. So I would like that looked at or discussed further with or I wouldn't be able to support it after that. And I do support the proposal for the HR person, but that really kind of skews it a little bit. But please don't take blame on Mark because you can't do an employee orientation all day long. So, thank you.
Lee, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to support this position, especially support it as a shared position. When I started my position as select board member, I remember talking to Chris Ketchen. I was working in Lee at the time, talking about one of the options of sharing services, and he spoke very, very highly of having a human resource manager between Lee and Lennox. And just in my time working with the select board, I can see how important it is to have this neutral party on staff to work with some of the staff. And it also maximizes employees' work. So I think this is a benefit to the town. I would keep this as a shared position though, but I think this is very, very important for maximizing the efficiency of the staff.
Thank you, Lee. Michelle, go ahead.
One thing, before we look at other towns, I happen to work for the town of Lennox. I think we should talk to maybe an HR person who does work there and say, what are your duties and responsibilities? How does this work? You know, because I am an employee and, you know, I gotta agree with Mark again. Employee orientations are incredibly important. It's what sets the tone for an employee's employment, and some of this isn't done right and isn't done professionally, and it sets the employee on a uncomfortable course going down the road. So yeah, Lee and Lennox does have a shared person, but what are the duties and responsibilities there as compared to what this person will be doing? So just because the next town has one doesn't mean we have to do exactly what that town does. I'm saying overall, in public administration, you're seeing more and more HR coming into play. It's a trend. It's leading to that trend. And there's usually a reason for that, and it usually has to do with lawyers. So, but like I said, I'm on board other than the OPEB issue there. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Michelle. Let's move on to town clerk, page 8.
Just going to go ahead and.
I'm sorry, Steve, I'm sorry. Just one last quick question on this, on the HR topic.
Sure.
The $75,000 grant. I presume that's a year-to-year grant. Do you have a view on how long we can expect to roll over that grant into future years? Or is that just speculating?
The $75,000 grant was a one-time grant. It was originally awarded for fiscal 22. However, since we've been unsuccessful in getting an HR director in place in fiscal 22, we asked for an extension into fiscal 23, and they actually granted an extension till the end of fiscal 23.
Okay. So we can't bank on the grant being there for the following year.
That's correct. At that point, we would have to divide that up according to the percentages I mentioned earlier. And I think the last thing I wanted to just mention about HR before we move on is that I just wanted to be clear that I wouldn't be presenting a full-time position. I don't think we need a full-time position. And when I mentioned this becoming a full-time position at some point, I'm talking years down the road. I don't mean anytime soon. I think this shared approach really is a nice way to step into this slowly and test it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to the town clerk.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just work my way down just like everyone else kind of has. So town clerk line, my salary is just, it's a 2%. The election workers, you'll see a big jump in that. This current year, we only have one election, and in fiscal 23, we have 3. So you'll see that that reflects on other lines as well. For the election workers, I've really had to beef it up a lot with COVID. I have to have extra people on staff just to clean after everyone's used a voting booth. So I've had to have people in both in Housatonic and Great Barrington for that. For the election workers, it's also gone up as well because of they keep increasing the minimum wage rate. And last year I actually did not include an increase for that. So I was a little bit short last year. So, and because they're raising the minimum wage, which is what the election workers get, that in turn makes me have to give the wardens a little bit more because they have a little more responsibility than election workers. So I had to increase that pay rate as well. The registrars stayed the same. The assistant town clerk, so hers was a pretty big jump. Kathy, I don't know if some of you remember, Kathy used to be part-time, and then she started full-time. But when we bumped her up to full-time, we pretty much kept her at a part-time rate. And we just kind of wanted to see how the first year would go. She's had a full year now in January being full-time. She's been great, tremendous with everyone coming in. And she currently is making, I do believe, 18, I think it's $18.72 an hour. And so the salary line that I have bumped her up to $21.93. That still makes her pretty much one of the lowest paid admins, which she's not technically an admin. She's an assistant town clerk, which means when I'm not there, she should, she has to act as town clerk in my role when I'm not there. So even at the $40,070, that is still lower than the lowest admin, which is in the fire department and the Council on Aging. And that person came in at the same time as Kathy, and she's making quite a bit more than Kathy. So I increased it, but not to the point where, it's above and beyond anyone else along the same similar lines. So that's all the top part, the personnel. The equipment, maintenance and repairs, that has gone up some. And let's see. That is because of the poll pad software that I have, the poll pads that I use for town meeting. The maintenance went up on that because of something that was prior to me. They took out the company, they bought out the company No Wink, which is the one we originally had for the poll pads. And they were supposed to be charging a higher rate a couple years ago. So in error, LHS forgot to be charging us the higher rate. And in turn, now I've got to go up. It used to be a lower amount. It's now up to $1,500 a year. So that's why there's quite a bit of an increase in that line. The publications, we cut it 1,000. The records preservation is the same. Office supplies is the same. The elections obviously is higher because of, what I had said before. We have 3 elections instead of 1. Other supplies has gone up just a little bit, not much. Travel and training is the same. Dues and memberships is the same.
Questions?
Well, I will say I cannot be fully objective here. Kathy was very helpful in my onboarding, so I'm very supportive of her getting a salary adjustment on that based upon that experience. On the election workers, is it fair to compare the fiscal 21 actual election worker line to what you're expecting for fiscal 23, just based upon that being an election year?
Fairly comparative, but in fiscal 21, we wouldn't have planned for COVID.
Right.
So, we didn't have, I wasn't planning for having all these extra people cleaning, and all of that. So fairly comparative, but still it's higher. So between the COVID and between the minimum wage, going up. It's been going up like every single year for the last couple of years. And this is the first year I've actually included the minimum wage increase in there. It's only I think second or third budget season. So I didn't even think of that last year. So that's why there's also that increase to go up to 12.
Understood. And I'm sorry, maybe you made this point, I didn't follow it. You put in for a request for 5,000 new equipment, and that you've agreed to with the town manager to remove that. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. My office is a shared office. It's my office and the assessor's office, and we have one copier for the two of us. But the equipment for the maintenance for it, and if I was to buy a new copier, it comes out of my line. I was putting in for a new one. We have a lot of usage with our copier, especially because it's two offices using it. And the parts are kind of slowly going. And I've been told by McFarland that I really should plan to get a new one, because eventually they won't make the replacement parts anymore, because it's starting to become an older copier. But it was my choice to make that cut in that line to keep the assistant town clerk salary increase in there. So that's where I made the cut, was the copier, so I could keep her increase.
Okay.
Ann, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Jen, I'm just looking at, I see the salary increase for the town clerk is 2%, but the amount, I think the request was more than that. And then looking in, and I don't see that in any other salary line. I'm trying to remember if town clerk was in the salary study. I'm sorry, I can't access it while I'm sharing my screen. So I'm just.
Mark, do you want to answer that?
Sure.
It's one of the positions that you're thinking of in the salary. So I'm just not remembering.
Yeah, so I think every position, with the exception of 2, was recommended by our salary survey through our consultants for an increase. I was clear with the select board, with the finance committee, and with staff that the salary survey I would work through slowly with the select board. Mm-hmm. I did make some adjustments last year. I did not make adjustments to every department. I don't know if you want me to walk you through the ones I did do, but I, again, asked for a contingency fund this year so that I could make adjustments as needed throughout the year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Storty.
I would just like to quickly comment, Paul Storty, Chief of Police, Great Barrington, that I truly support the raise for Kathy. She's an essential part of that team in the clerk's office, and she does a lot. And I just want to really support that raise and bring her up to the salary that's deserved for what she does for us.
Thank you, Chief. Michelle?
Yes, thank you. Mark, could you, first off, the salary survey, I know that was quite a while ago. Could you email me and any other person who wants another copy of it, please? But my comment has to do with the HR position. Again, when discussing Kathy's salary, it goes to show the value of the HR position. Having, our town clerk, she gave her proposal, but to have an HR person involved to really look at the position, do a comparative analysis, and obviously the immediate supervisor plays a role in this. But, going, okay, this one in the senior center makes this one compared to that, it gets a little personal and subjective. And an HR person can kind of pull that out, and it could be more. Yeah, HR person could say, geez, we really should increase that line more than what's recommended. So I just wanted to point that out, that this conversation on the salary line and probably future salary lines, an HR person would go a long way in helping us make our decisions. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me just comment on that. one of the things that I would prefer we do is discuss increases based on position, not based on people. Because personnel is not in the hands of the finance committee or the select board. Positions are. So while I don't disagree with the raise, is the position worth increasing from 1872 to 2193? We're not talking about the person in the position, because that's not under our purview. I just want to be careful about that, because in this case it probably doesn't matter, but in other cases it could lead to problems. So I just want to remind everyone that it's really the position that we get to talk about.
I do agree with Steve on that, and that's exactly what an HR person would do, is keep people on point when discussing people, meaning myself on the finance committee and anybody else. So Steve, I do agree with you on that.
And if I can just add one more thing, Steve.
Yes, of course.
Relative to salaries. Michelle, to answer your question, I will send that salary survey out to the select board and finance committee again. I just made a note. But I wanted to just mention that the reason I did not support the salary increase in the budget process is because our charter, the way our charter is structured, salaries are adjusted by the town manager, not through the budget process and not by town meeting vote. So just wanted to be clear on that.
Anyone have any other questions? Moving ahead to building inspector, and this is a big jump, page 17.
Just for Ed May here, bear with me.
Yep.
There he is. Ed, you should be good to go. Did we lose him?
Yeah. No, he's there. He just has to unmute himself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes, Ed.
Very good. We're looking at a level funded budget. There's an increase for the assistant inspector that we've lost, and we're hoping to attract a qualified candidate with this salary increase. And other than that, we've kept it as level funded as we could.
Questions? Seeing no.
What is the timetable for reviewing all the various fees that the inspector's office charges, and whether or not they're appropriate or they should be potentially lowered or raised?
We have visited, I believe it was 2011 was the last time we looked at it. Haven't had any inquiries about it since, other than complaints from citizens.
I'm sure. It seems like 10 years is a long time. And I guess I just wonder if are those fees still the right fees given the costs and expense related to providing these services to the town?
We can look into that. We'll put on a select board's agenda. We'll talk to the department heads. So it's a worthy conversation to have.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one. Health Department, page 20.
Just just looking for Rebecca in the
Yep.
panelist list. There she is. Rebecca, you're good to go.
Hey, everybody.
Rebecca.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the health inspector line. You'll see that I proposed an increase of about $11,000 for the health inspector. And just listening to the last couple of discussions on recent departments, I'll just keep it to the inspector position and not how amazing Ned Sabisky is personally. But he was hired in July of 2020. That was a particularly hard time to join the health department as we were in the midst of a pandemic, and he rose to the challenge. In the first 6 months, he conducted 2 to 3 inspections on every one of our 135 food establishments, bringing up the inspections to date prior to the end of the year. Some of what he's taken on in the last year and a half, in February of 2021, Ned began the process of becoming a federal Drug and Administration certified food inspector, FDA food inspector. So this training means that you go through extensive training in both the Massachusetts Food Code as well as the federally adopted Food Code. And he's one of 5 FDA inspectors in Berkshire County. After Locke passed away, we lost an FDA certified food trainer. So Ned filled that gap in Great Barrington. So we're back to providing the highest level of food safety to our restaurants. Ned also sends out regular updates to food establishments and lodging establishments about any COVID guidelines or changes in local recommendations in regards to COVID-19, and then also safe food class offerings. And then this last fall, he filled in as the interim animal inspector, conducting all 30 barn inspections in Great Barrington and Housatonic. And he is also the primary contact for permit renewals, which is a heavy lift at the end of the year. We have, like I said, over 130 food establishment permit renewals, and then 12 lodging permit renewals. And then we also have tobacco, septic installer, solid waste hauler, just to name a few of the permits that are renewed. So he checks our permitting system daily to go through any new applications that we may have received for septic installations or Title V witness applications. And he also reminds applicants when their permits are scheduled to expire.
So let me just interrupt for a second. Just want to remind department heads very gently that we're reviewing positions, not personnel. And it's not our job to review personnel. It's the town managers in the charter very clearly. So tell me what the position deserves. Don't tell me what the person deserves, please.
Sure. Well, that's the end of my overview anyway. But I hope that gave you a little snapshot of what sort of services the position provides for Great Barrington. And then moving down to contracted services, that line is really comprised of two different services. So that's our public health nursing contract as well as our beach testing contract. So we test Lake Mansfield and the Green River, a couple different locations on the Green River, Memorial Day through Labor Day.
Do I have any questions?
I have a question.
Go right ahead, Garfield.
Okay. We are, again, as you had stated, we were talking about the position. I just wanted to ask Rebecca if the duties that John Ned is performing, are they not his standard duties? Again, I don't want to talk about the person, but the job, as Stephen said. So were these things that are in line with his job, and these are his job responsibilities anyway? So wouldn't these things have to be done, regardless if he's a nice guy or not?
No, not necessarily. So obtaining the FDA food inspector certification is not a requirement of the job. The other things that I listed, like taking on the responsibility of permit renewals and then barn inspections, that's not inherent in his position. Those are added duties that he took on, just speaking to how willing this particular person is to be a good health inspector, but they're not inherent in his job description.
Lee, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. So my question is, just for those that might not know, we now know what the health inspector does. What does the health agent do, to put you on the spot?
Well, I do lots of things. So I also do Title V inspections. I permit septics. So that means I do perk witnesses, which is a soil evaluation. And then I review septic installation plans. I review well applications and well plans. I do housing inspections, which the health department does a lot of housing inspections. So rental properties or even rental properties have to comply with the Massachusetts housing code. So if an occupant calls the health department with a complaint, then we follow up with an inspection to make sure that that unit or that residence is compliant with the housing code. We also follow up on complaints, public nuisance complaints, or complaints about food safety in our food establishments. We do annual lodging inspections. I do annual pool inspections. And this is all aside from pandemic COVID response that takes up a lot of my day right now.
Thank you. So as a follow-up, I know that we're talking about a potential short-term rental bylaw that if it's passed at town meeting and if it goes to town meeting, that it might possibly include an element of inspection. So I'm just wondering if that has any thought in this particular budget, or is that something that would be dealt with on a different line item?
Lee, I don't think Rebecca can answer that. And my answer to that, and Mark probably can chime in, is I don't know that we can suppose what may pass. I think we'll have to deal with that when it passes. And to implement that won't happen right away anyway. So it'll probably be only a partial part of the year. Mark, would you agree?
That's correct. The current draft is January of the following year, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah. So that wouldn't start to January, and we would have to find money in there, because to raise the budget on something that hasn't been passed yet would probably be controversial.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Michelle?
Mark, putting you on the hot spot again, and I don't want to step on your toes in your position, but and I agree with Steve a lot, looking at the position. And these, these are sizable increases. If a finance committee member wanted to see a job description, would they be able to obtain a copy? Because,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I was just curious, and again, this isn't put you on the spot, how often are job descriptions looked at, reviewed? For example, if a job description is behind, like in my experience, job descriptions are generally looked at every year. I don't know, but again, you don't have an HR person there to do that, and you have other things on your list. So I was just curious, that this isn't a criticism or anything, is there a routine that's followed to look at job descriptions? And because Rebecca said, this is what this position does, the health inspector, but the person in this position is doing extra duties or responsibilities. Of course, in many job descriptions, there's that little paragraph at the end that said any other duties and responsibilities, and that gets us every time. So I'm just curious on the methodology used at the town hall.
That's right. We do have that catch-all statement on almost every job description that we have here in Great Barrington. The reality is job descriptions are looked at when we recruit a new candidate to that position. I've had numerous conversations with our neighboring towns as we discuss what this HR employee position will look like. And the first thing on my list is to reevaluate, review every single job description in this town. Some of our job descriptions for positions that haven't turned over in several years, the paper is yellow.
I believe it. And that's not unusual. And in the absence of an HR professional, and I'm talking again, HR certified professional, that's a big part of their job. So that's not unusual, but I was just curious about that. And so I appreciate your honesty on that.
Yeah, we have a comprehensive policy, set of policies in place now. That was something that the board reviewed and approved in the last couple of years. And that was a giant leap forward for us, I think 3 decades, in fact. And the next priority on my list related to HR, other than securing an HR director, is to review all of our our job descriptions.
And may I just ask one more question, and please excuse my ignorance on this, is what jobs are union and which jobs are not? I assume at a certain level, an employee is not union, is that correct?
I would say in general, for example, the police department, patrol officers are union, but the command staff is not.
Right.
With the highway department, laborers are union, administration, management staff are not. And with the library, it's the same.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All other employees are non-union.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Garfield, go ahead.
Well, I hate to be a killjoy type person, but we're coming up on 8:30.
Garfield, I got this covered. Don't worry. I already texted Mark and told him this was the last one we're going to
I
talk
haven't eaten
about.
yet, Stephen.
And I got this covered for you. Don't worry. Anyone else under health department?
One last point, similar to the building inspector, can I ask that the select board at some point just do an evaluation of the fees that are charged for these inspections and permits, and just to see if they're currently appropriate?
Phil, when you asked about fees, and I should have been clear, we won't just look at one department, we'll look at others. And if I recall, some of the fees are under the purview of the select board, some aren't, but we'll figure it out and we'll look at all fees in the town.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Can I just say that the Board of Health is planning on revisiting our fee schedule sometime in the next 3 months or so. They've tabled that discussion. Our fee schedule was last updated in 2016. So we are gathering information of surrounding towns and hopefully talking about that as a Board of Health soon.
Yeah, and the first thing we'll do is look at who's responsible for recommending the fee schedule and who's responsible for implementing. It's a little tricky because I've been on the board when we've done it. I think some boards can change theirs on their own, others just have to approve it. So we'll figure that out. Anyone else? And as Garfield so politely reminded me, it is 8:31, Garfield, I'm a minute over. We still, by statute, we need to do citizen speak, and of course, we look forward to it. So, citizen speak, anyone who has anything can raise their hand. There are no hands going up. Media time. Seeing no hands, we are 2 minutes off. I owe it to you tomorrow night. And
I'm looking forward to.
By unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Nice seeing everyone.
Thank you.